For years, Freen and Becky were known simply as fan favorites, two actresses whose chemistry lit up the screen and ignited one of the most passionate fan bases in the industry. But 2026 marks something very different. This is no longer just a story about popularity. It is about evolution, control, and a quiet rise into true industry leadership. At the beginning of their journey, Freen and Becky were often discussed together as a pairing before they were recognized individually. Their projects were measured by view counts, trending hashtags, and viral moments. Every public appearance sparked excitement, but it also came with expectations they didn't create themselves. Fans wanted closeness, consistency, and reassurance. The industry wanted results. For a long time, Freen and Becky carried both without complaint. Then something shifted. By late 2025, subtle changes began to appear. They became more selective with interviews, fewer casual live streams, more carefully planned public statements. When they did appear together, it felt intentional, not performative. Insiders noticed that meetings once handled by management now included Freen and Becky directly. Decisions were no longer being made for them. They were being made with them. 2026 confirmed what many suspected. Freen and Becky were no longer just faces of a brand, they were shaping it. Their project choices reflected maturity. Instead of repeating safe formulas, they leaned into complex characters, darker themes, and stories that demanded emotional depth. Industry professionals quietly praised their preparation, discipline, and creative input on set. Directors began describing them not as actresses who followed direction, but as collaborators who elevated scenes. What surprised fans most wasn't the success, it was the confidence. Freen stepped into leadership with a calm authority that came from experience rather than noise. Becky, once seen as the playful heart of the duo, revealed a sharp strategic mind behind the scenes. Together, they balanced each other in a way that no longer needed explanation. They didn't rush to clarify rumors. They didn't respond to every headline. Silence, when chosen, became power. Their evolution also reshaped their relationship with fans. Instead of feeding constant updates, they offered moments, meaningful ones. A handwritten message, a carefully worded interview answer, a shared glance on a red carpet that said more than any statement ever could. Fans didn't feel abandoned. They felt trusted. Behind closed doors, their influence grew. Brands no longer approached them just for visibility, but for long-term alignment. Production companies adjusted schedules around their availability. Younger actors openly cited Freen and Becky as examples of how to survive fame without losing control of one's identity. Perhaps the most defining aspect of their 2026 evolution is this: they no longer chase validation. They create value. From fan favorites to industry leaders, Freen and Becky didn't change who they were, they refined it. They learned when to speak, when to step back, and when to take the lead. And as 2026 continues to unfold, one thing is clear: this era isn't about proving anything. It's about owning everything they've built. As the months of 2026 continued, the shift became impossible to ignore. Freen and Becky were no longer reacting to the industry was reacting to them. Schedules moved when theirs filled up. Scripts were rewritten with their names already in mind. Invitations came not just to attend events, but to sit at tables where decisions were made. This was a level of influence they had quietly grown into, not demanded. And that quiet confidence made it even more powerful. What stood out most was how intentional everything felt. When Freen appeared alone, she carried herself with the assurance of someone who understood her worth beyond applause. Her interviews reflected depth, answers rooted in reflection, not performance. She spoke about longevity, about choosing stories that would still matter years later. Not once did she sound rushed. Not once did she sound uncertain. Becky's transformation, meanwhile, caught many off guard. Beneath her familiar warmth was a sharpened sense of purpose. Those close to her noticed how closely she studied contracts, how deeply she involved herself in creative discussions. She wasn't just protecting her future, she was designing it. On set, younger cast members gravitated toward her, drawn to her calm guidance and quiet confidence. Together, Freen and Becky began redefining what a successful partnership could look like. They didn't need constant proximity to prove connection. Their bond was evident in how seamlessly they supported each other's growth, even when walking separate paths. One could step forward while the other stepped back, and neither felt diminished. Naturally, speculation followed. Fans searched for hidden meanings in appearances, pauses in interaction, even in silence. But Freen and Becky never fed the noise. They let their work speak. They let time answer questions that words never could. And time was kind to them. Each new project deepened respect for their craft. Reviews focused less on pairing and more on performance. Critics who once dismissed them as trend-driven began acknowledging their staying power. The conversation had changed, not because Freen and Becky demanded it, but because they earned it. Perhaps the most telling sign of their evolution was how at peace they seemed. There was no urgency to explain themselves. No panic when trends shifted. No fear of being forgotten. They had reached a stage where legacy mattered more than virality, where choosing less could mean building more. By mid-2026, fans weren't just watching Freen and Becky, they were learning from them. Learning how growth doesn't always announce itself, how strength can be quiet, how true influence isn't loud, but lasting. This chapter of their story isn't about reinvention. It's about arrival. Freen and Becky didn't leave their fan-favorite era behind. They carried it forward, refined, strengthened, and grounded into something far bigger. And as the year continues, one truth remains unmistakable. They are no longer just part of the industry's conversation. They are shaping its future. Even as the year progressed, the aura around Freen and Becky only intensified. Every public appearance felt like a masterclass in poise. At premieres, they walked the red carpet not as young stars trying to prove themselves, but as leaders who had already claimed their place. Flashbulbs captured their synchronized smiles, the subtle exchanges that fans swore were secret messages, and the effortless way they commanded attention without demanding it. Behind the cameras, their influence was even more tangible. Production teams whispered about their insistence on creative integrity. Scripts were polished to meet their standards. Scenes were reshot when their instincts suggested it, not because anyone else questioned them. Directors, once hesitant to challenge rising stars, now sought their opinions, knowing that Freen and Becky's insights elevated the entire project. What truly captivated the public, however, was the bond they continued to nurture despite the pressures of fame. They were often seen sharing quiet moments between takes, laughing over private jokes, or reviewing scenes together late into the night. It wasn't just friendship, it was a partnership built on mutual respect, trust, and an unspoken understanding that they were in this journey together. Fans documented every subtle gesture, every fleeting look, creating a buzz that spread across social media platforms. But while the world speculated, Freen and Becky focused on the work, allowing their performances to speak louder than rumors ever could. And speak they did. Audiences found themselves drawn to the authenticity and depth that radiated from their roles, recognizing that what they were witnessing wasn't just acting. It was a reflection of their real-life growth and synergy. By late 2026, the narrative had shifted. No longer were they simply stars riding waves of popularity. They had become trendsetters, mentors, and icons of resilience. Their influence extended beyond entertainment, shaping fashion, culture, and even business practices within the industry. Yet despite all the attention and acclaim, Freen and Becky remained grounded, reminding everyone that success was most powerful when coupled with humility and vision. As 2026 continued, the question on everyone's mind was no longer about what Freen and Becky would do next. It was about how the industry and the world would adapt to the era they were defining. And as the cameras rolled, the fans cheered, and the awards stacked up, one truth became undeniable: Freen and Becky were no longer following trends. They were setting them, shaping a legacy that would last well beyond the glitz, the premieres, and the headlines. Every move, every project, every appearance confirmed it. This was their year, their time, and the world was watching in awe. As 2026 unfolded, the momentum around Freen and Becky only intensified. Every project they touched seemed to break records, and every public appearance became a headline-grabbing event. The anticipation for their upcoming releases, particularly Cranium, reached fever pitch, with fans dissecting teasers, trailers, and behind-the-scenes clips frame by frame. Social media erupted with theories, fan edits, and countdowns, proving that their influence extended far beyond the screen. What stood out the most was how their partnership had evolved. Gone were the days of tentative camaraderie or public politeness. Freen and Becky had developed a seamless synergy, both professionally and personally, that allowed them to anticipate each other's moves, offer subtle guidance during shoots, and even improvise scenes in ways that elevated the final product. Directors and co-stars frequently commented on how rare it was to witness such an intuitive connection, calling it a masterclass in collaboration. The industry, too, felt the impact. Marketing campaigns shifted to align with their brand, luxury endorsements clamored for their presence, and global platforms highlighted them as the faces of a new generation of power players. But even with the glittering attention, Freen and Becky remained focused on the craft. Long hours on set, meticulous planning sessions, and late-night script reviews demonstrated that their drive wasn't fueled by fame. It was fueled by excellence. Off-camera, they used their platform to inspire and influence positively. Charity initiatives, awareness campaigns, and fan engagement events highlighted their empathy and leadership. The authenticity they brought to both their work and public life resonated deeply with audiences, reinforcing that their rise wasn't just about entertainment, it was about impact. By mid-2026, every appearance, interview, and project release solidified their status not just as celebrities, but as icons. Fans weren't just following Freen and Becky, they were witnessing the evolution of a brand, a partnership, and a cultural phenomenon. With each step forward, it became clear that this was more than a comeback. This was the establishment of a lasting legacy. And as the world eagerly awaited what they would conquer next, one thing was undeniable: Freen and Becky weren't merely participating in the industry. They were redefining it one project, one appearance, and one milestone at a time. Their story wasn't just unfolding on screens, it was being written into the annals of entertainment history.